What if I told you that some of the most beautiful plants you can buy at your local nursery right now are ticking time bombs waiting to destroy your property? Plants that look completely harmless in their little pots. Plants that show up in every garden magazine. Plants your neighbor put in 5 years ago and now regrets every single day. Most people don't realize this, but while you're carefully planning your garden, picking the right soil, worrying about deer and drainage, there are plants out there that will turn your yard into a battleground. Plants that laugh at landscape fabric. Plants that crack concrete. Plants that don't care about your property lines, your fences, or your feelings about the whole situation. Today, we're counting down the 15 most destructive plants you can put in your garden, ranked from seriously problematic all the way to genuinely catastrophic. And we're not talking about ugly weeds nobody wants. Some of these are beautiful. A few of them are spectacular. That is exactly what makes them dangerous, because beautiful plants don't get pulled. Stay with us for number 12. It has been on this planet for 300 million years and has survived every extinction event that ever happened. Your garden fork is not going to be what finally stops it. And number 15 combines genuinely valuable lumber with the ability to convert your entire property into an impenetrable thorny thicket. It gives with one hand and takes with the other, and it has been doing it on its own timeline, not yours, since before you ever bought the place. Let's get into it. Before plant 1, if you've ever made a gardening mistake that cost you serious time or money, or if you're here specifically to avoid making one, hit subscribe right now and ring the bell. Every week, we publish content that helps you garden smarter, spend less, and actually enjoy your yard instead of fighting it. All right, here we go. Plant 1, bamboo, running types. Because this is probably the most commonly planted ticking time bomb in residential landscaping, and the gap between how it's sold and what it actually does to your property is genuinely staggering. Running bamboo sends underground rhizomes shooting outward at speeds that feel impossible for a plant. 10 to 15 feet of lateral travel in a single growing season. And these aren't delicate little roots. They're thick, woody, sharp-tipped structures that punch through landscape fabric, crack concrete patios, and have been documented breaking building foundations. Those rhizomes dive 3 feet deep and travel under fences, driveways, and property lines without a single visible warning above ground. You plant a tidy privacy screen. 3 years later, shoots are erupting through your garage floor, and your neighbor is looking up property law. And here's the part that really finishes people. Microscopic rhizome fragments left in the soil will regenerate complete plants. You can dig for weeks and still find new shoots the following spring, right on schedule, completely unbothered by everything you did. Bamboo is beautiful. It grows fast. It creates instant privacy. Nobody argues with that. But running types need properly contained systems only. Industrial rhizome barriers buried at least 30 inches deep, and even then, annual inspection is non-negotiable. Pro tip: clumping varieties like Fargasia expand slowly and predictably, and don't send underground invasions across the neighborhood. Same look, none of the nightmare. Start there. Think of it as the gorgeous privacy screen that was quietly building a tunnel network under your property from day one and sent you the bill 3 years later. Plant 2, Japanese knotweed. There are houses in England that sold for less than their asking price specifically because of this plant. Not the neighborhood, not the school district, not the roof condition. A plant. Japanese knotweed is the only plant on this list that mortgage lenders specifically consider when assessing your home's value. In the UK, its presence near a property is a legally required disclosure during sale, and buyers walk away. Banks have refused mortgages over it. That is the level of destruction we're dealing with. The rhizomes penetrate 7 feet deep and spread 60 feet horizontally from a single plant. They push through the smallest cracks in concrete and asphalt, then expand as they grow, physically prying structures apart from the inside. Driveways, basement floors, foundation walls, drainage systems, all documented, all expensive. During peak season, this plant grows 4 inches per day. Cut it, and the rhizomes push new shoots within days. Any fragment the size of your fingernail regenerates a complete plant. Professional eradication takes 3 to 5 years and costs thousands. There is no shortcut. There is no clever workaround. There is only time and money. Pro tip: never compost or green bin Japanese knotweed. Improper disposal carries legal penalties in many regions. Bag it sealed and landfill it. Call a specialist before you start any removal work. Think of it as the plant that doesn't just ruin your garden, it attacks your driveway, your foundation, and your property value simultaneously with equal enthusiasm and zero remorse. Plant 3. English ivy. English ivy is one of the great con artists of the plant world. It spends the first few years being exactly what it promised: low-growing, tidy, evergreen ground cover for shady spots. It looks responsible. It looks like it belongs in a period drama. It looks like someone who reads. Then it starts climbing, and once it climbs, the damage becomes structural. The aerial rootlets work into every crack in wood siding, mortar joints, and tree bark. As those rootlets expand, they pry apart whatever they're gripping. Mortar crumbles. Wood rots faster. Trees get buried under a layer that blocks their own sunlight, adds hundreds of pounds of dead weight to branches they were never built to carry, and creates a direct access highway for pests and disease to reach the canopy. And here's what locks you in. Mature ivy produces berries that birds carry everywhere: gutters, roof tiles, every surface a bird has ever sat on. You're not just fighting the plant you put in the ground, you're fighting every plant that every bird in your neighborhood has been quietly planting for you, for free, for years. Pro tip: if ivy is climbing a tree, don't pull it off, you'll tear the bark. Cut all stems at the base. Let the upper portion die while still attached. After 6 months, remove the dead material carefully. Think of it as the house guest who seemed perfectly pleasant for a few years, then quietly started dismantling the walls from the inside. Plant 4. Kudzu. Kudzu grows a foot per day during peak season, not a foot a week. A foot per day. That is not folklore. That is measured, documented, peer-reviewed reality. This plant was deliberately imported from Japan and planted across the American South in the 1930s for erosion control. The government promoted it. Farmers were paid to grow it. And then over the following decades, it buried the landscape. Today, it covers over 7 million acres in the southeastern United States. Entire forests converted to kudzu monocultures. Drive through affected areas, and the landscape looks like green waves frozen mid-motion, draped over every tree, every building, every abandoned car in its path. One plant produces 60 feet of vine in a single season. The roots penetrate 10 feet deep and weigh hundreds of pounds. The vines root at every node, so one plant becomes dozens of connected plants spanning hundreds of feet. Cut them and they regrow harder. A single missed root crown regenerates the entire infestation. Suggesting kudzu for any landscaping purpose is like solving a mouse problem by introducing tigers. Technically addresses the original issue, creates something exponentially worse. Pro tip: if kudzu is encroaching from adjacent land, contact your county extension office immediately. This is not a battle one garden can win alone. Control at any meaningful scale requires coordinated regional effort. Think of it as the erosion solution that became the erosion, then became the trees, then became the buildings, and is still becoming everything else. Plant 5. Trumpet vine. Trumpet vine traps you with hummingbirds, and that is a genuinely effective trap because hummingbirds are wonderful, and those orange-red blooms are some of the most spectacular flowers in the gardening world. Year 1, you're delighted. Year 2, you have the best hummingbird setup on the block. Year 3, you have a problem. Underground runners surface 15, 20, 30 feet from the parent plant, through the lawn, through mulch beds, right against the foundation. The vine itself climbs using aerial rootlets strong enough to tear siding off houses, rip gutters from roof lines, and damage wood structures that took years to build. The older the vine gets, the thicker and woodier those stems become, and the more force they apply to whatever gave them a surface to grip. Professional landscapers have a specific rule about trumpet vine near structures. Don't. Removal means cutting the vines, scraping aerial rootlets without damaging the surface beneath, and digging out every underground runner. Miss one fragment, and you are starting from the beginning again. The hummingbirds are real. The flowers are genuinely beautiful, but you can have both without signing over your siding. Pro tip: native coral honeysuckle attracts the same hummingbirds, stays genuinely manageable, and will not attempt to dismantle your house. Make that swap before you plant, not after. Think of it as the plant that promises you hummingbird paradise and delivers an increasingly aggressive vine, slowly taking your house apart board by board, while still producing beautiful flowers, so you feel guilty about being angry at it. Plant number 6, Wisteria, Chinese and Japanese. There are genuinely few things in gardening more beautiful than wisteria in full bloom. Those cascading purple flower clusters look like something that should come with a string quartet, and for the first few years, you think you've made the best decision of your gardening life. Then the vines start getting serious. Chinese and Japanese wisteria don't just climb, they strangle. The vines twine around anything vertical and grow thicker every year. Mature stems reach the thickness of your leg, and they exert enough force to crush wooden pergolas, collapse arbors, snap large tree limbs, and rip gutters clean off roof lines. Structural damage reports from wisteria are not rare occurrences. They are common. The vines grow with enough measured, patient force to visibly twist and deform the structures they're climbing, given enough time. Then the seeds arrive, dozens of explosive pods per vine, seedlings appearing across the property, each one ready to become another decade-long commitment you didn't budget for. Pro tip: American and Kentucky wisteria are native species that bloom beautifully but grow far less aggressively. If Asian wisteria is established, prune hard twice a year, post-bloom in spring and again in late summer. Miss a season, and the vine banks that time and spends it against you. Think of it as the fairy tale plant that is quietly, methodically, year by year, squeezing the life out of whatever structure was kind enough to give it something to climb. Plant 7, bishop's weed. Goutweed. Bishop's weed is the plant that experienced gardeners warn about with genuine emotion in their voice. Not mild concern, actual emotion, because it is the definition of a long-term trap dressed up as a short-term solution. Year 1, it looks reasonable. Pretty variegated leaves, tidy spreading habit, covers shady areas where nothing else grows. It does exactly what it says. Then, quietly, without any dramatic announcement, it starts moving into places you never invited it. The rhizomes fragment incredibly easily, which means every removal attempt breaks them into pieces, and every piece grows a new plant. It forms dense colonies that push out everything else. By year 4 or 5, it's jumped every border, invaded adjacent beds, and is working into the lawn. The only real solutions are complete soil removal and replacement, or years of digging combined with herbicide treatment. And even then, one missed fragment puts you right back where you started. The real trap is the attractive leaves. They keep people thinking they can still control it, right up until the moment they understand they absolutely cannot. Pro tip: wild ginger, foam flower, and native pachysandra all cover difficult shady ground without declaring permanent war on everything growing near them. Make that decision before you plant, not 5 years after. Think of it as the ground cover that looked like a practical solution, moved in quietly, and then spent the next decade conducting a systematic hostile takeover of your entire garden while looking charming the whole time. Everything we've covered so far, you can fight. It takes time and persistence, but there are paths through. What we're about to get into is different. The next 8 plants are the ones that genuinely break gardeners' spirits. Hit the like button before we go there. It costs nothing, and it helps this video reach people who are about to make the mistakes we're describing. All right. The catastrophic tier starts now. Nobody warns you about Jerusalem artichoke. That's the whole problem. It sounds completely harmless. It's a type of sunflower. It produces edible tubers. You can roast them with olive oil. Sounds like a good, practical garden plant. And it is, right up until you try to manage it. The tubers break apart with almost no provocation. You look at them wrong during harvest, and they're in 4 pieces. Every single fragment grows a new plant. So you harvest them, inevitably leave behind broken pieces and small tubers buried too deep to find, and next spring you have twice as many plants. You try to remove them, break more tubers in the process, and the problem compounds again. The tubers grow 6 feet deep. The plants reach 8 to 10 feet tall, shading out everything within reach. Within a few seasons, Jerusalem artichoke has taken permanent possession of whatever ground you planted it in. There is no practical removal method that works in open soil. The plant found a loophole in how gardening works, and it exploits it completely and without apology. Pro tip: grow them only in a raised bed with a solid, completely gapless bottom. That is the only containment that works. In open ground, you are making a permanent, irrevocable decision whether you realize it or not. Think of it as the permaculture experiment that seemed like a fun idea for one season and then quietly signed a lifetime lease on your garden without asking anyone's permission. Plant number 9, Horsetail. This plant was alive when the land you're standing on was at the bottom of an ocean. It watched continents move. It survived the event that killed the dinosaurs, the Permian extinction before that, and every other catastrophe this planet has thrown at life for the last 300 million years. Your herbicide is not its first challenge. The rhizomes penetrate 6 feet into soil and shatter into fragments the moment you try to dig them up. Those fragments are coated in a waxy layer that makes them nearly impervious to any herbicide you have access to. The same coating sheds whatever you spray on the foliage above ground. The plants reproduce by spores rather than seeds. They contain silica that makes them toxic to grazing animals. They thrive specifically in the wet, disturbed soil conditions that gardens and construction sites produce. Horsetail is effectively permanent once established. The only reliable removal is replacing all soil to a minimum depth of 3 feet. Gardeners who've encountered it describe it as the plant that broke their spirit, and they earned that description through genuine experience. Pro tip: never bring in topsoil or compost from a site where horsetail grows. One contaminated load can introduce it permanently to a previously clean garden. Always know where your soil comes from. Think of it as a 300-million-year-old survivor that watched the dinosaurs come and go. It is not remotely concerned about your garden fork.
Plant number 10, Tree of Heaven. The name Tree of Heaven is one of the most misleading things in all of horticulture. Ailanthus altissima is engaged in active chemical warfare against every plant growing around it, and it has the compounds to back that up. This tree produces allelopathic chemicals that poison the surrounding soil for competing plants. It doesn't just outcompete everything nearby for water and nutrients. It makes the ground itself hostile to anything else trying to grow there. It didn't just enter the competition, it rigged it. A single mature tree produces hundreds of thousands of seeds annually. The root system launches suckers dozens of feet from the parent. Cut the tree down, and the roots send up an aggressive flush of new shoots, sometimes 50 or more from a single stump. The wood is weak and brittle, making mature trees genuine hazards in storms. Urban foresters consistently rank it among the worst invasive trees in North America, and they deal with a lot of bad trees. Pro tip: have herbicide ready before you make the cut. Apply concentrated triclopyr to the cambium ring of the fresh stump within 60 seconds. The tree seals the wound fast, and that window closes whether you're ready or not. Think of it as the tree that didn't just compete with everything around it. It poisoned the soil, rigged the competition, and made sure nothing else could win, even if it wanted to.
Plant 11, Purple Loosestrife. Here is something genuinely difficult to say about a plant. It is beautiful, and it is destroying something irreplaceable. And both of those things are completely true at the same time. Purple loosestrife produces spectacular purple-pink flower spikes that look stunning along water. Garden centers sold enormous quantities of it for exactly that reason. The problem is what happens when it escapes into natural wetlands, and it always escapes. A single mature plant produces up to 2.5 million seeds per year. Those seeds travel by water, wildlife, and equipment. The plants form dense monocultures that systematically eliminate native sedges, rushes, and wildflowers, removing the food and habitat that waterfowl, amphibians, and native insects depend on. A wetland taken over by purple loosestrife looks lush and full from a distance. It is ecologically hollow up close, beautiful on the surface, empty underneath. It is the landscape equivalent of a building with a perfect facade and nothing behind the walls. Banned in multiple states, wetland restoration projects spend enormous resources removing it, with new plants guaranteed from the seed bank for years after adults are gone. Pro tip: blazing star and blue flag iris are native alternatives that provide the same dramatic color in wet areas while actively supporting the ecosystem rather than replacing it. Think of it as the beautiful flower committing quiet ecological homicide, one wetland at a time, while looking so good that people keep planting more of it.
Plant number 13. Yellow archangel. Yellow archangel is the least famous plant on this list. No cultural notoriety. Most homeowners have never heard its name, but in the regions where it has established, forest ecologists talk about it with a specific kind of quiet frustration that belongs to problems that compound slowly and are genuinely hard to reverse. It was introduced as ornamental ground cover for shady areas, and it excels at it. The disaster is what happens when it leaves the garden. Yellow archangel invades forest understories and forms dense, unbroken carpet that eliminates spring wildflowers, trilliums, bloodroot, wild ginger, native violets, species that require open, undominated forest floor and that took decades or centuries to establish in those ecosystems. What it removes isn't just plants, it's the habitat of every pollinator, insect, and bird that depended on those plants. It's the forest floor that was building itself quietly for 100 years before this ground cover arrived and decided it didn't need to share. Pro tip: if your property borders any natural woodland, avoid yellow archangel entirely. Native wild ginger and native violets provide genuine shade coverage without the ecological consequences. Think of it as the ground cover that doesn't just take over your garden, it walks into wild forests and erases plant communities that took centuries to build, one stolid, patient stolon at a time. Plant 14. Russian olive. Russian olive looks exactly like something from a landscaping catalog. Silvery foliage, fragrant flowers. Thrives in dry, poor soil conditions where most ornamentals quit. It seemed for a long time like a genuinely intelligent plant for tough sites. Then ecologists started following where it went after it left those gardens and what it was doing when it got there. Russian olive is a nitrogen fixer, which sounds like a benefit until you understand that the native plants in most riparian ecosystems are specifically adapted to low nitrogen conditions. Elevated nitrogen favors weedy invasives. The tree systematically undermines native willows and cottonwoods that river corridors depend on, grows fast into dense thicket that blocks wildlife movement and water access, and produces berries that birds carry for miles in every direction, constantly without stopping. New populations establish faster than anyone removes the existing ones. Restoration projects spend thousands removing it from affected waterways. New seedlings emerge from the seed bank for years after. In practical terms, this tree terraforms the land around it to better suit its own needs.
Pro tip: serviceberry works as an ornamental alternative for difficult sites without the invasive spread. For moist riparian areas, native willows provide genuine ecological value rather than systematically undermining it. Think of it as the elegant ornamental that didn't just invade. It rewrote the soil chemistry, guaranteed its own spread through every bird in the region, and terraformed the land into something that better suited its ambitions than yours. Plant 15, Black Locust. We saved Black Locust for last because it is the most honest ending to this list. Not the most dramatic, though it is dramatic. The most honest. Robinia pseudoacacia sends root suckers outward in every direction, sometimes dozens of feet from the parent. Each sucker becomes a new tree that sends its own ring of suckers. A single tree becomes a colony. A colony becomes a thicket. Within years, open land becomes an impenetrable stand of fast-growing thorny trees that exclude everything else. The thorns are not decorative. They make clearing this plant genuinely physically dangerous. Like Tree of Heaven, it's allopathic and a nitrogen fixer, altering soil chemistry against native plants that belong there. Cut it down and the roots send up dozens of new shoots, harder than before. The wood is genuinely excellent, dense, rot-resistant, durable. Black locust was planted widely for fence posts and erosion control, and those original plantings are still spreading today, decades later, completely indifferent to the intentions of the people who put them there. The most important gardening skill isn't knowing what to grow, it's knowing what to leave at the nursery. Black locust is the plant that teaches you that lesson the hard way. It doesn't ask permission. It doesn't negotiate. It spreads on its own timeline, and it will keep spreading long after you're gone. Pro tip: late summer is the most effective treatment window. The tree is actively moving sugars downward, carrying herbicide toward the root system. Cut stump triclopyr within 60 seconds on every sucker, every time. Minimum 3 to 5 years of persistence. Think of it as the reminder that sometimes the most useful plant is the one that costs you the most. It offers excellent lumber with one hand and takes your land with the other, and it does it completely on its own schedule, not yours. If you made it this far, you now know more about destructive plants than most professional landscapers bother to tell their clients. If this saved you from a mistake, or finally explained a problem you've been fighting without understanding why, hit the like button. Drop a comment and tell us which plant is your personal nightmare. We read every single one. Every single plant on this list got put in the ground by someone with completely good intentions. A privacy screen, ground cover for a difficult corner, a beautiful vine for a trellis, a dramatic flower for a wet area. The nursery tag didn't mention the foundation damage. The magazine photo didn't show the rhizomes spreading under the driveway 3 years later. Nobody told them, so they found out the hard way, over years, at real cost. Knowing what not to plant is one of the most underrated skills in all of landscaping. The problems that never start are the ones you never have to spend years undoing. Do the research before anything goes in the ground. Check with your local extension office. Find out if it's invasive in your region. And remember, the nursery doesn't owe you a warning. That's what we're here for.